Buffering. All right, everyone. Welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton and Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end, barber, cup of coffee, NFL, served our country. Now he's in his business school. It's getting fast paced for Artie there. You look disheveled, buddy.
Lost you there. You good?
You with me? Oh,
I'm
man.
with you.
Oh, we're starting out from the trenches, dude. We're starting out of the trenches.
Man.
How you doing? Tell the folks how school's going.
I'm good, man. Trying to learn how to read and write for the first time. That's always interesting. As I like to tell people, when I had the opportunity to go to school out of college, the college application process was a bit different than it was this time around. People were less interested in my height, weight, and 40 time, and more interested in the previous grades, applications, and essays. But we landed on our feet, so I'm getting back into the flow of things here. As I mentioned to you offline, long day today, class, a lot of studying, a lot of extra work put in, and I was exhausted. But I was like, I could use an hour of talking college football because a lot's going on.
Yeah. Dude, what do you think that 40 time is for you now, Artie? What you clocking?
Futile. I mean, it's abysmal, but it wasn't very good to begin with at my peak. So we'd be struggling right now. I do run a good bit, but it's kind of like that, like old man, kind of like let's call it like O-line coach whose wife got on his ass because he was overweight, and so he does that kind of like trot walk, and after doing like shuffling for a long time, just trying to keep the calories off. But 40 time would be tough, but I can.
I'm running a mean 5.2. I think so.
Realistically, I'm probably like a 5.2, 5.3 if we're being completely honest. But you know what? We're armchair quarterbacks. What do they call or lounge chair quarterbacks now? We don't have to worry about running 40 times.
Yeah, well, it was good for everyone as well. They don't have to watch that. But everyone, thanks for jumping in on us with us here on Thursday. Artie, we got 9 days to the Georgia football season. Begins in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, taking on number 14 Clemson and the Dabo Swinney's Tigers. They're so excited for week 0 matchup. We got a good one in Georgia Tech and Florida State. Watch out for your Yellow Jackets here. I think they have what it takes to kind of do something. We'll get into that later. All right, I do want to talk about some injury concerns here out of fall camp. It feels like a broken record almost each season headed in to the first game. Think about last year in Branson Robinson. You had Light McConkey was out dealing with some things, and numerous other guys. Kind of the same story this year. Thankfully, I think, knock on wood, these guys haven't had season-ending injuries, right? So these are all kind of minor things, but it is going to take some time for some of guys like Branson, Roger Robinson, turf toe. Kirby Smart said that this week, gave us some insight into what exactly he's dealing with. We knew it was something on his foot. He was in a cast a couple of weeks ago. So he's got to get back from that. Questions the Georgia running back depth there a little bit because you got Branson still has to come back and get back to that football shape. It's unclear how much of a load they're going to want to put on him after that patellar tendon tear last year and coming back to things. Colby Young has a hamstring, and that kind of talks a little bit about the receiver depth. And we got into that a couple of weeks ago, you and I, already when Ra Thomas was dismissed, and we talked about that a little bit, and we talked about how Colby Young, might have to step up here. It looks like Dylan Bell might be that starter at X, but Colby Young was right there with him. He played well in the spring game. His first opportunity to show his worth in front of the fans. I think he played well. Can he be more than a red zone and third down threat? Can he be in the right spot for Carson Beck and those guys on the defensive line, which is pretty decimated right now, not season ending, but guys dealing with some things. You have Warren Brinson and Achilles, Xavier McLeod, South Carolina transfer. He's got an undisclosed injury. Kirby Smart wouldn't give any details there, so something to watch out for. I think really the silver lining here out of his updates from Kirby Smart this past week was Jared Wilson was a full participant in the scrimmage at center. Tate Ratledge and Drew Bobo were working there. at center when he was out with an Achilles. But he is back. So that's really good news for Georgia. They can get some more continuity with their front five and really lock in there, right? Then Smael Mondon, he's done, and Kirby kind of broke it down this way. It's almost like a low management to me for him. And Smael is he's going 100% at times, and then they're kind of taking some reps off his plate here and there. It kind of sounds like a LeBron James situation with Smael right now, getting some time off. But it's good because he's had that nagging foot injury forever, it feels like. Dating back to last season, throughout the spring, right? Missed a lot of spring ball, missed the scrimmage as well. But I think he's one guy to watch, and we talk a lot about C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, and there's even the new signees and Justin Williams at linebacker and Jalen Walker coming in there and playing inside. But Smile's that guy to me that can really have an all SEC caliber season, and to go really high up the draft boards. He's up there in Georgia tackles each year. He's led the team before as well in that category. I think he's in for a big seat if he can get that foot injury to 100%. And I think I wanted to touch on this already from Kirby Smart. He talks about depth, right? And I'll just read this quote for you. I feel like we have a lot less depth than we've ever had, and that's kind of the common theme talking to other coaches I talked to. And Smart said this during this week's presser. I call it the deterioration of football because every year we've been here, I feel like we've had more players capable of going in and play winning football, and then every year that has gone down. What do you think Kirby's talking about here, right? Because he didn't really give specifics around why that might be. Is it transfer portal? That's kind of what my mind went to because, Georgia lost 24 program record in the 24 cycle, 24 and 24. Is that what he's talking about here? Do you have any idea already from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make, right? Like talking about when you're looking at, or I should say what Kirby made, you're reiterating Kirby's point is and you and I have talked about this now for about a year, right? And we're talking about the transition into this era of the professionalization of college football. And that's how I like to describe it because in my opinion, when I played and even the years, even when Herschel was playing, it was always a full-time job, right? We were always playing the highest level college football that there was. It was always demanding as a professional sports league would be. But the problem is we didn't get paid, right? So we were amateurs, right? Essentially, we were working for free, if you will. Now that the kind of money has started flowing, there's so many different things that have come with that. The transfer portal actually happened before NIL, and that was kind of the first implementation of this professionalization of college football. I don't necessarily disagree with it. I don't like it. There are a few things, if I was like college football czar or college football commissioner, that I would change. That's probably a conversation that you and I, can have in the off season for an episode. But I think to address what Kirby is saying right now is he's like, we can recruit and have a top 1, 2, or 3 class. And in his case, it's always 1 or 2 of the past like 4 or 5 years. We can recruit as many guys as we possibly can. They can all be 5 stars or 4 stars. And, we can even go into the transfer portal and get some guys that we need. But ultimately, we don't have control of our roster at all, right? Because anyone can leave at any point in time. And this is kind of where I argue against the professionalization of college football because, I'm not going to name names. I mean, because I don't want to, it's their jobs, but I have multiple friends in the college and NFL profession and coaching profession, that is. And a lot of NFL guys are like, we don't want to touch college because we don't have any power or any control of how to construct these rosters because it's like the free agency period is for all players at all times, all season long and really, all year long. And so I think what Kirby is saying is, I don't think he's like anti-transfer portal or anti-NIL or anti-change in college football. I just think he's like, we need some regulation because we're putting some of our guys at a disadvantage. If we're recruiting, to capacity and having all of our scholarships, given out and taken, and all of a sudden it's June and we lose 3 or 4 guys to transfer portal for whatever reason, it's like it's very hard to fill that gap, right? And the unique thing about football that's unlike any other sport is there's 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, and 11 guys on special teams at any given time. So you're talking about 22 people on the field at once, right? Your opponent, day in and day out at practice, is made up of your entire team. So you're banging against these guys on a daily basis, right? Like injuries happen. And all of a sudden, if you start offensive camp or if you start preseason camp on the offensive side of the ball and you have 15 offensive linemen that can run one, twos, and threes, and all of a sudden, you know, 3, 4, 5 guys go out with minor injuries and 2 or 3 guys transfer right before, all of a sudden you have like 2 full lines, maybe 1.5, and then those guys get double and triple of the reps, which in some cases is great for a young guy who needs it, right? You mentioned Bobo's son. He's probably getting a lot better right now and putting himself in a position to play. But I think for Kirby, and it's obviously if it's affecting Kirby, it's affecting everyone across the country because Kirby, you know, just by way of what he's done there, should be in the best position roster-wise. It tells me that there is kind of a systemic problem right now with college football, and that's an inability to keep a roster, you know, game ready throughout a season.
Yeah, and it's especially poignant in the spring, in my mind.
Totally.
I think Kirby's talked about this as well, and other coaches have. Is because there's just 2 windows. There's that winter window, so you come out of that winter window with losing some guys, maybe gaining some guys, and then your early enrollees, right? And your class is pretty much put together, absolutely almost full by the December and the early signing period. So you have a really good idea, right? Well, kind of wrong because you have another window in the April, right? So then you can lose who knows who. And then boom, what are you going to do then? Oh, then it's about quickly developing and getting guys ready to step in a new role in just a few months, right? So I think that's a huge challenge. And you're right, like college football czar commissioner, I'd change the same thing. Absolutely.
And it's one more thing. Like, and again, I don't want to dive this into all of it, but like these players will walk into their position coach's office at the end of spring. Guys who have not played significant time, like scrimmage downs time, right? Whether it be a linebacker, safety, tight end, quarterback, and they'll walk into their position meetings or position coach's room and say, "Hey, I have another coach that DM'd me on LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, but Instagram or something, and he's offering me $10,000 to go transfer. Like, I want to stay here. Can you match that?" And then if they can't, they're gone the next day. And I don't think it's a bad thing that players can get paid. I think it's a bad thing when coaches have their hands tied because they're just like they technically still can't be the ones to promise the money. You know what I mean? So it's like you just have situations where there can be mass exodus for no other reason other than the fact that someone may have got a message on Twitter. And next thing you know, it's like you're down a couple linebackers, you're down a running back, or you're down a quarterback. And I think that's where the regulation needs to come, and needs to come quick.
Yeah. And there's going to be some dominoes from the NCAA, agreeing with the Power 5 or Power 4 now, to share revenue directly with players. Okay, so what does that kind of institute? I think, and Artie, you're a smart guy when it comes to these things as well, is contracts, player contracts eventually.
Yep.
Right? If you're paying guys, you have a contract with them. I think it's something we all have probably right now that everybody's watching, listening, and us here, we have contracts. So I think that's something that's going to be, and then when you do have that contract, you can be like, all right, this is what I need from you. I need you. Are they going to put stuff like you need to be here for at least 2 seasons, something like that? Right. And
I think they should.
Yeah. And then you have to play in games. There's no opt-outs, if you're healthy. Right.
Effectively, those scholarships are contracts too, right? It's renewed year over year. It's not a 4-year thing. It's not guaranteed. Coach Rick always guaranteed it 4 years, barring everyone staying out of trouble. But in terms of like, they have contracts. It's those scholarships, right? So they can evolve what that scholarship is into an actual contract with pay to play. But what I always say to guys, it's like, be careful what you wish for, because when you sign that contract, they own your ass right now. Like NFL, like when I signed that contract, it was like that they had my rights. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
don't mean like civil rights, but like professional rights. You know what I mean? And it was stressful. It was competitive. They brought guys in every single day. Every Tuesday, they'd bring in, while we were practicing, they were bringing guys to try out. And everyone on the team who didn't have, unless your name was like Von Miller or Peyton Manning or whoever, whatever team I was playing for at the time, it's like, you look over, like, does that guy look like a tight end or is he a linebacker? Because you know that they're coming in to see if the guys in the street are better than the guys in the locker room. So
Yep.
I always say to the young college guys, like, be careful what you wish for, because you put contracts that they will kick your ass out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's touch on some scrimmage standouts here that I wanted to make sure that we note. So, and we
Yeah,
talked a little bit about the running back with Roger Robinson being out with that turf toe. Branson's coming back from a really serious, pretty serious injury in that knee, right? So there are little questions there, but it's a really talented group. Um, but I think Nate Frazier, the 24 signee, has made a real splash in that room right now. And I think it wouldn't be a surprise to see him get some early carries. Now, of course, it depends on the health of the other two mentioned there. Um, but I think, if you see him come in at Clemson and as a rotational piece, wouldn't be surprised. Definitely thinks he gets a lot of work in that game two matchup in Sanford. So I think it's really good that he's coming on strong and turning heads. It's kind of consistent through practice reports that he's been doing well, and Kirby Smart has spoke highly of him as well. Gunnar Stockton, Kirby said that he had the best scrimmage, probably his best scrimmage at Georgia this past week. Think about it, the quarterback situation, even at Georgia, and about how many new faces we've seen ever since really Murray's run there. It pays to
a
have
lot
a
of
great
dudes.
backup. That's why they get paid well in the NFL, folks. And especially a season like this when you come in as a championship contender, number one AP, number one coaches, and your power rankings everywhere you look as well. And you got the Heisman hopeful quarterback in Carson Beck. If something happens, it sounds like Kirby and Mike Bobo, they're putting a lot of faith in Gunner there. And I think, he showed enough in that spring game, and he's been in the offense for so long. He has great rapport, but not only the ones and taking those reps, but also those backups and the new guys. And talk about a little bit about that, the importance of the backup and preparing, like, as you're the starter. I know Aaron's come on here a bunch of times and talked about that as well, but from your standpoint as a tight end.
Yeah, well, a couple weeks ago, Mike Bobo came out and said like that. I guess like Carson stood up in front of the QB room and said like, basically challenged the other guys in the room, like, hey, like, each rep that you have, make sure you prepare like you are the starting quarterback. If I can go back and he was like, if I could go back and do one thing differently, it's I would have prepared and approached each practice, each meeting, you know, each walkthrough, each lift that with the mindset of like I am the guy, because you never know, you know, you never know when your shot or when your number is going to get called and it's going to be your shot, right? And I know Bobo was like very, knowing him, he probably got choked up and loved that out of Carson. I just know how he is. But to the question, talk more about the backups, right? And talk about depth and how important depth is and how important it is for the guy behind the guy. It is for that person to be ready and to be ready to play at a high level. I know for me at the tight end room, we had an All-American guy and Orson Charles, right? Who I think we've had on the podcast before. And Orson was a guy that was just kind of a freak. You know what I mean? Like never really got hurt, built like a Greek god, strong as heck, could catch, could run. But we had a pretty deep tight end room at the same time, and we weren't running a lot of two tights, right? So Orson was getting a majority of the snaps, as he should. He was a starter, he's All-American. But the one thing I loved about that tight end room, whether it be myself, Aaron White, Bruce Figgins, Jay Rome was redshirting, but even Jay, went balls to the wall as well, is we prepared every single day to play at a high level. And I think one thing that Kirby does a great job of, that I think some of the greatest coaches in college football have always done, whether it be Nick Saban, whether that be Pete Carroll, and yes, Urban Meyer. No, we don't like Urban Meyer, but if you watch those guys coach, if you listen to what they're saying in press conferences, if you listen to their players, no matter the era in which they coach, they always underline and emphasize the word compete. compete, compete, compete. Every day is a competition. And the great teams compete with one another to make each other better on a day-to-day basis. And so you mentioned all those injuries, right? You mentioned a lot of guys who are supposed to be key contributors and will be key contributors this season. I think the one thing that Georgia has going for themselves right now is they have a Heisman hopeful at quarterback, and it seems that they have a viable number two option behind him who has the trust of the entire coaching staff. What that tells me is they essentially have two other coaches that are players on staff that are in the locker room every day that are coaching these young guys up. When I say young guys, I mean the young offensive line. I mean the young skill guys on the edge. Tight end seems to be like a solid position group. But the thing I'm excited for is Carson is going to put his faith in those young guys. And because of how highly skilled he is as a thrower, his ability to nurture those guys up, he's going to help create the depth that we don't have at this moment. And I think that's a huge missing piece to the discussion right now, because I know when Murray was a senior, he was able to get guys up to speed so quickly because his knowledge of the offense, because he had been a 4-year starter, so he had the credibility both inside that locker room and outside the locker room. And at the end of the day, he was the hardest worker in the room. And so I think Carson has the same exact role. I'm not afraid to say it, more talent than Murray. I think Murray would agree.
Yeah.
And so I think he's going to be able to develop the depth on this football team here in the early parts of this, preseason and soon to be season. And when guys get healthy, watch out for Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a note off that, we'll get into it more, especially next week. And it's a good time to let everybody know our show schedule for this season, 2024 season. Already now going to be going live on Monday and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Kind of like this on this beautiful day of August 22nd. So that's our show schedule this week. We'll have guests on. We'll have more of our pregame predictions and talk through all of that on Thursdays. And then Mondays is going to be kind of a recap and national scene. What's going on? What do we need to look at? And what do we like? And just a quick note on that offensively as well, with the certain injuries at receiver and running back. And we talked about this last year going into that first year of the offense under Mike Bobo. You had Beck making his first really career start there and first season as a starter. We expected some mistakes here and there, right? Some uncharacteristic mistakes here and there as that offense kind of starts building into the season. It's not going to be perfect, right? It's something to note. I don't think they're going to come out firing on all cylinders against Clemson. That's a good defense they're playing, one. And two, I mean, they have a lot of rapport they need to build because of the injuries and one's not being able to play in practice like they usually are, and other guys having to step up, right? If they all come back, then Carson, boom, there he is with everybody on the field, all of his tools that he hasn't really been able to practice with. But I think, midpoint of the season and on, that's where you're going to be at your best. And that's where usually Georgia and Kirby Smart's teams, they get really good there, right? They're a lot better in the midseason. I think the sign of good coaching and good players especially as well. And like you said, got a couple of captains, a couple of coaches on the field there, and Carson Beck and Gunnar Stockton that have been in the offense for a long time. Gunnar, I know he's a redshirt sophomore, but it's his third year, right? So something to keep in mind as we move on. We're going to get into some trap games here, guys, on UGA Football Live, all caps with Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end. But first, I want to recap. This is a really cool thing if you're a Georgia football fan, is what the NFL really routinely, and it definitely comes up in the spring, obviously, with the draft and such, but the NFL praising Kirby Smart for the job he does and his staff does at Georgia in developing talent. Now, Kamari Lassiter went to the Texans with the 42nd pick. Lockdown at Georgia, and we covered that, him going to the Houston this spring on the podcast. We talked a lot about him as a player and eventually an NFL prospect there. But he's had a really good offseason as a rookie here, and already knows how difficult that is to step in a room with grown men and compete every day and make your presence felt as a young guy. And D'Amico Ryan, Houston's head coach, he really said some good stuff about both Kamari and Georgia. And I got a little clip here for us that I'm going to throw up. But how difficult that is while I get this up, Artie, just talk a little bit about that and kind of that intro into the NFL space coming out of college, even though it is, University of Georgia, one of the marquee football programs in the country. It was that way when you came out still, but still difficult.
There's nothing to compare it to. I mean, the transition from high school to the SEC was incredibly difficult. Speed, size, the type of football player you were going against. And I was like, you know what? You go to the SEC because it's basically the farm system of the NFL. I'm playing against these guys on a daily basis. I'll be ready to go if I ever get a shot in the NFL. And don't get me wrong, I was prepared well. I was physically ready to go. But that first full speed, full go, it's like, I don't know if it's the money that's the motivating factor that makes people go extra hard, or if it's just everyone's a grown man. But like those walkthroughs were full speed. I mean, like the first mistake I ever made was my first NFL walkthrough. I went out there with sneakers because it said sneakers and like pennies. I went out there, people were wearing gloves and cleats, and I was like, "It's a walkthrough." And sure enough, I found out why people were wearing gloves and cleats because the essentially the front eight versus like everything up front was live. No helmets, no nothing. Full speed. Let's go. Like people would be bloody, getting in fights, this and that. And it's just a different level. And that's just the physical stuff and the effort and the attitude. The pro style schemes are definitely a level above what you probably see in college. And I think we could talk more after here about this clip about how Kirby has done such a good job of developing his guys to be pro ready.
Yeah, so here is D'Amico Ryans, Houston Texans head coach, on Kamar Lester and Kirby Smart.
He's built for this. Like when it comes to the mental toughness piece that plays a lot into being a good football player at this level. Like you have to be mentally tough. You have to have that next play mentality. And at Georgia, Kirby's done a great job. You can tell of raising them the right way, of having those guys. Kirby's done a great job with all of his guys, having those guys NFL ready to go. And that's one thing you see from Georgia, like year after year since he's been there, right? Those guys are plug and play type players, and it's a credit to him and his program and how they run things there. It's you get a Georgia guy, you're getting an NFL player.
Yeah, I mean that's recruiting billboard, put it up and leave it there kind of material. If you're Georgia,
that's from an ex-Alabama linebacker too.
Absolutely, yep, yeah. You think Alabama? You can't be mad at Kirby Smart if you're an Alabama fan. I mean, he won three national titles for you, right?
Have you ever met an Alabama football fan?
I have some friends.
Yeah. But I think, look, Kirby, what makes a great college football coach starts with recruiting. Can you recruit? Second, can you bring in those alpha, type A, alpha, 5-star guys and get them all to buy in, learn a little bit of humility, self-sacrifice, and come together to form a culture, and then ultimately develop them to be NFL ready while also committing to that culture and building a championship football program. Obviously, I think very highly of Nick Saban. I think he learned from the best. He, being Kirby, learned from Nick Saban because I think Nick Saban did that for 20 years. And I think Kirby's going to do it for probably hopefully more than 20 years. But, man, and you can just see it, dude. You can watch on Sunday and you could be like, man, who's that? And then also you look him up. You're like, oh, it's a Georgia guy. I didn't even realize. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how it was for Alabama for so long. Alabama was just turning these guys out, whether it be running backs, linebackers, eventually wide receivers. And I think what you're going to see here now for the next 10 years is a whole lot of names going to be called on Sunday for sack, touchdown, TFL, great block, whatever it is. Yeah. And you look at the back of jersey, like, oh, yeah, that's a Georgia guy. Yeah. And I think that has to do with the program in which Kirby has built. It ain't easy, right? But he's done it.
Yeah, and it'd be a different thing if it was just blue chip guys doing this stuff in the league, right?
No, it's everybody.
But it's not. You got your 3 stars, right? You got your guys that are undrafted. as well, who come in and really make their splash as a pro and kind of got overlooked in college. That would make it differently if it was just blue chips. But to your point, Kirby Smart in his first eight drafts, 63 NFL draft selections. Saban had 48. It's a big difference, right? That's a big difference. That's crazy numbers, and it's a record. But just something to hype up the Georgia fans here. I know they love that right before we kick off the season here.
But nothing to hype about, though. It's just facts.
Yeah.
It's numbers. You know what I mean? It's not like in some ways it's harder to do it with the blue chippers, like to see them through to get them to the NFL, because like the 2 stars are gonna buy in no matter what, because most of them are from Georgia and would go to war literally for University of Georgia. But like to get guys from Maryland area, Massachusetts, California, Texas, it's like they could have went anywhere. And in the transfer portal era, they could leave at any point in time. And so the fact that he's doing it, he's got Lad McConkey going second round, and he's got all these 5 stars going first round. And like you say, he's doing it with everyone. That to me is the hardest, most impressive thing.
Yeah, transfers too. Absolutely. Like Tyke Smith going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's talk trap games already. And I'm looking through this, and I had this idea. I wanted to talk it through. I'm only seeing a couple here. And my first thought was Kentucky, but then I kind of talked myself out of it because think about what Kentucky and the questions they have to answer around their team and a new quarterback, right? A lot of transfer pieces, right? I don't think they're going to be at a level to really give Georgia a really good game at that point. Maybe later in the season they use that talent, like a couple of Georgia transfers there, Brock Vandegrift and Jamon Dumas-Johnson. If they get those guys playing really well and using the pieces around them, I mean, that's a good coach they got up there in Lexington. I mean, they can make something splash. But I just see game 3, I don't know. But then you got off at Alabama, Auburn, in Sanford. Now, if this was at Jordan-Hare like it was last year, different story. I would have circled that, highlighted that, all capital letters. But in Athens, right, so there is that. But still, I mean, Auburn, the pieces they added, you look at the receiver recruits that they added, Cam Coleman is a beast. He reminds me of Julio. Now, listen, true freshman, okay? Not done it on the field yet. But speaking strictly from what we've seen from him, what he did in the spring game, and then there are other reports about the other receivers that signed in that class, really talented guys. And you think year 2, Hugh Freeze, right? And Hugh Freeze going on the road in the SEC, it's done pretty well for him in the past, right? Especially in the state of Alabama. So I don't know, man. I like that one as a potential trap game. It's really my first circle, and I've only got 2. Artie, what do you think about that game as a man who's played in the Deep South's oldest rivalry?
Well, I don't actually hate the Brock Vandegrift coming out revenge game, however you want it. I mean, he looks like he should be an extra in Game of Thrones, but that's a whole different story. Not worried about Kentucky. I think Clemson's going to be a tougher game than we probably think. I think the reason why it's noon on the 31st is because I think the TV people don't think it's going to be a close game, and they're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that already. I think my only thing was non-conference doesn't mean as much now, right? Because the SEC championship bid and then the schedule that Georgia has in conference. I guess maybe that's why I didn't.
But Kirby loves Davos Reading. And that is a rivalry game. Like I got to play Clemson once. It's a big game. It's a big game. I like the Auburn track game. I do. I think normally Georgia historically just does very well against Auburn. But Hugh Freeze is like a magician, man. Like I don't know what it is about him. Obviously, he's a good football coach. He's recruited very well, and I think he's turned that thing around quicker than probably some people thought. I just don't see him coming into Sanford and winning that game. So the trap game for me has got to be and again, it doesn't really count because it's they're number 6, but it's Ole Miss. And I just think that eventually Lane Kiffin is going to get one, right? And what I mean by get one, like get a big game, and he had a couple big wins when he was at USC, and I just think he's recruited too well, and he's too much of a offensive savant, and he has too much talent there. And I like Jackson Dart a lot. That I think that could be a game where they're probably not number 6 at the time. They probably slip up once or twice, and we probably overlook them because I think Tennessee's probably going to have a good year. We'll be ranked higher than 15 during this time. And then all of a sudden we're looking ahead. I think Tech's going to be better. We're probably looking ahead a little bit. And Ole Miss might be like in the teens because the SEC is just a gauntlet now. Yeah. So to me, that's the now knowing my luck, we'll probably beat them by 50. But I just think that Lane Kiffin eventually, a lot of those, those are going to fall, those games.
And there's definitely a sour taste in their mouth. I mean, Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin included. I know some of those high-profile guys transferred out, but they added some really good pieces, and a lot of their team is back. That's why their number's stinking 6. But that's definitely sour because you look back at that game, and that was one of the biggest games of the week.
Yeah,
it was one of the biggest games of our season where they were ranked, and the hype behind that game and in Athens at night. It was awesome going into it. We thought we thought we were in for a shootout, right? And obviously we know what happened. So have to absolutely have that. And Kirby's going to tell those guys that. He's going to get off about that.
Kirby's
he's like, "Oh,
smart, man."
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. He's not. I don't think they look ahead as kind of what we're talking about. But I'm talking like how much are we traveling, right? How high of a pressure environment are we coming off of into this next game? And I like your Ole Miss pick, especially. I mean, on the road, Oxford's going to be absolutely jumping for that opportunity too, especially Georgia's number 1. And then I picked Florida as my other one, and I know it's a rivalry game, and that might not even count. But what I'm saying is, you go at Texas, right, off Florida, then you have to go to Ole Miss. So it's like, and it's a neutral site, so you're on the road for 3 weeks. You get that one bye, but you're on the road for 3 weeks. I don't know. I just see that as one of those games where, like, you're just coming off a huge game against Texas, and who knows how that turns out. And then off week, then Florida, and you got to go at Ole Miss. That's a tough stretch. I don't know. I like Florida, but I also like your pick of Ole Miss. Tennessee-wise and Athens, though, it's just Tennessee and Athens. I don't know.
I'm still scarred from that Hail Mary in 2016. So the Florida, I was thinking about the Florida game, and this is, not a hot take, but, as we know, college football, no one's seat is ever really safe. And if there's a seat that's hot, it's the seat in Gainesville. The only reason because I was thinking about it, I was like, that because of where it is sandwiched and because they're probably not going to be, they have talent, but they're not going to be very good. I thought of that being a trap game, but I don't think there's any way that Billy Napier is the coach of Florida in November 2nd.
Yeah. And thinking further through this, there's a real possibility that Georgia's best stretch play-wise is after that bye week. Because you just think about that, how you take that bye week, right, and you work on opponents in the future. So you're working on, during that first week of that bye week, right, you're working on Ole Miss, Tennessee, Georgia Tech, really, right? And then that game week, then it's only Florida, right? That's all you're doing. But you're
healthy.
That, yeah, and you're a little healthy, but you have that prep, too, for in the future. So it could very well be that best stretch, but it is tough from a travel standpoint, and then coming off a really, really huge beginning of the season at Bama, at Texas. And again, who knows how those games turned out? Who knows how the Auburn game turned out?
Florida's got a tough schedule too. They got Miami first game, week 3, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, which is, they're not a bad program. Tennessee, Kentucky, who knows, us, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. Like that is just brutal.
Yeah. And I think I read a report about Billy Napier and the AD telling him basically you won't be fired because of this schedule. And I'm just like, are we leaving this? I don't know if there was a message board warrior or whatever. Don't quote me on this, but if that's true, I'm like, dude, you can't just because you have a hard schedule. You got to read between the lines here, brother.
Oh no, I do. I think he's DOA. I think if he loses to Miami first game,
Yeah.
yeah, it's because but let's say he
You think
loses to
it's a
Miami.
first game fired? He loses Miami, it's done.
No, I'm just saying.
Oh,
I'm
man.
just saying. Let's say he loses Miami, beats Stanford, loses to A&M. They're 1-2, and then they beat Mississippi State, so he's 3-2, and then he's effectively fired. He'll lose that UCF game, and they will axe him immediately after UCF.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a good point for it. It would be. But also at the same time, you're really going to let your team then lose every single game with a coaching staff without the head of the snake there. I mean, that would even be – I guess that's the nation's hardest schedule without even your head coach. Like, that's –
you know how ugly
that's
it's going to
abysmal,
get
dude.
if they
I would just leave
like,
him in.
Just because we all hate Florida, let's just hypothetically go through the schedule.
Okay.
Lost Miami, win
Yeah.
Stanford, lost A&M, especially if we think A&M is going to beat Notre Dame, which we do. So that's their 1-2. Mississippi State, I have no idea. We'll give them that win. That's 2-2. I think they lose to UCF. I like Gus Malzahn. That's 3-2. He's fired effectively. Let's say they keep him for the end of the season.
They might be able to run the ball to pull a Michigan and run the ball 30 times and beat UCF.
At Tennessee, losing that game. Kentucky is a coin flip. We're going to wax them. Texas is going to wax them. It's at Texas, by the way.
Oh,
LSU is going to wax them. Ole Miss will probably wax them. And then it's at Florida State. That's 3 wins.
Dude, if you really hate Florida, like most of you do who are listening to us rant, this is a beautiful, beautiful time. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, that's just a slaughterhouse.
Absolutely. Dude, that's just crazy schedule. And Georgia's not far off, but still, it feels like they're
Georgia's
really
good.
Off as far as the strength of schedule. Yeah, they're absolutely. But I don't know. I think it's crazy. If I'm a Florida fan, I might be even tuning out. I might just be like, let me know. I'm going to pick pumpkins today. Let me know what happens. Because
mark my words, UCF, they'll axe them.
That is a hot take, and that is a future prediction. Artie's really first future prediction of the season. Artie, before we're going to do some pick 'em on this Georgia Tech FSU game. Let's call it. We're going to do JC versus Arthur this year. We're going to pick 5 games plus the Georgia game each week and spread. We'll see who comes out on top. But before that, here's my idea about how ESPN can help their image with college football fans, Artie. And I teased this a little bit to you before the show, but I wanted to save it. So
yeah,
I'm thinking this. Somehow we use all that beautiful Disney money, okay, and we license the CBS SEC music, okay, because everybody's calling for it. Everybody's calling for it. There's not one college football fan where you ask them if they did this, would you think that's a good decision or a bad decision? Everybody's going to say good. Everybody's going to say good, dude, unless you're a troll, okay? So they spend that money and they do that, right? They even credit CBS. They're like, you're going to bite the bullet here. I know you don't want to push their stuff. You're not. You have the games anyway, all right? Play that. Instant gratification for college football fans, and they might like, and I think they would like, ESPN a little bit more because it's been just a crapshoot as of late. So that's my take, Artie. I think you bring that music in, give us a little nostalgia, all right? Keep things the main thing, and that is pleasing college football fans. And this is really collectively, we all, college football fans hate each other for the most part. Collectively, I think this is how we bring the nation together.
JC, you make an excellent point, and here it's a possibility. I don't know if you follow Business Wire or Wall Street Journal or whatever, but Paramount, the parent company of CBS, is actually in talks to be acquired, and they're selling it. The parent company, which owns CBS Sports and CBS. So if Disney were ever going to do that, now is the time to do it. You just go and hit up the woman who owns Paramount. Be like, look, we'll give you X amount of dollars. All we want is the SEC on CBS theme music.
Yeah.
We'll give you the credit. No worries. We'll take that. and we're just gonna slap it on before our marquee 3:30 game of the week each week.
Pride cometh before a fall, kids. Okay, and that's
Yeah,
the only thing
100%.
keeping them from doing this is pride. All right,
You know what's gonna be
lay your
sickening?
pride down.
What's gonna be sickening is in 2 weeks on Saturday when I turn on CBS at 3:30, and it's gonna be like,
Iowa versus
oh yeah,
Wyoming.
with no offense not allowed, right? Like it's just gonna be brutal, and I'm gonna be very upset. I'll be depressed. I'll text you. I'll probably say some colorful things about it to you. But what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? It's just like
Nothing, man. I hope they do it well, whatever they do. I just feel like, just thinking money wise, how are they gonna make money off of this? Is maybe doing a deal with like a popular artist each year and just changing it to their song or something. I just feel like that's what they do anyway. It's like whatever's hot or they think is hot on TikTok, they're like throw it up. Yeah.
They should just bring back the old like the drums from College Game Day that used to have when they would like travel
Yeah.
across the country in a little cartoony thing. That was fine. And just find out where Mark May is and just have him be the voiceover for whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know where he
Yeah.
went, but he was the man.
Or Big and Rich. I mean, keep all that Big and Rich. Let's do it.
Big and Rich is awesome. Yeah.
Oh man.
Mark
Something
May,
food for
of course,
thought,
yeah.
folks. Yeah, we're gonna end the show today. We'll do some pick 'em. All right, so this is a really cool game though. Is Tech Florida State in Ireland in Dublin? I mean, to go over there and witness that would be awesome. Artie.
Yeah.
First off,
100%.
second, you have a Tech team who's on the rise, who played Georgia. I want to say, well, Missouri. So they played Georgia like top 2 as far as closest in the regular season last year. Lost by 8. I know it was a garbage time touchdown, but still. Brent Key's got a good thing going on the hot recruiting trail, okay, which is a big thing for Georgia Tech. My brother-in-law is a Tech grad, and for the most part, if I'm not talking crap, I am real with them. I'm like, y'all are doing really good on the recruiting trail right now. They just got a 5-star offensive tackle, one of the best in the country, right? To go to Tech, it's a big kind of recruiting hindrance, their academics and what have you. Especially he tells me the kind of inner workings of that as well and how stringent they are. But on the field, I think they've been impressing, and they're a dark horse in the ACC, right? And you go on the other side, you got Florida State, who lost so many contributors from last season, right? Hey, undefeated, already undefeated, baby, champions. ACC championship, right? One loss, but they didn't try in that game, guys. All right, you can't count that. They didn't try. All right, they didn't even care. Anyways, you got DJ coming in from Oregon State, Clemson, right? He's an experienced guy, one of the oldest guys in college football, 6th year here, right? He's always been on that line of he's a good quarterback, and then the next week you're like, he's a quarterback, right? He kind of has that up and down situation. Now he faces, coming into a new team. Now he's done it before. Like I said, he was at Oregon State last year. RIP Pac-12. He comes in and with really an entirely new roster, sure, but it's also for Mike Norvell and that staff a new roster, right? They did it well last year, but what did they have last year? They didn't. They had Jordan Travis, years in that program, coming in and being that leader and that cog in the offense and a really dang good player as well, right? So it's a totally different story for them, and people are kind of already penciling them in as a playoff team or making the ACC championship, right? And I can see why. They do have a lot of talent. They've recruited well. Transfer portal's always been good to them, but can they put it together? I think it's a really big challenge with some different parts, like I just noted, from a year ago. And plus, this is, how far is a flight to Dublin, Artie? Because I have no idea. Are we talking like 12 hours here?
It depends where you're flying from. So my guess is they'd be probably maybe Tallahassee or maybe I don't know where Florida State would go. Atlanta could do a direct flight to Dublin. That's probably going to be like an 8-hour flight.
8, okay.
Probably more.
Oh, that's not too bad, I guess.
From Boston, it's like 6. So maybe it's like 8 or 9 hours.
Yeah.
Could be 10.
I mean, just imagine you and yourself in your playing career taking a huge trip like that for this weird kind of game, right? Not only like we're talking open in the season. You're not at home. You're not on the road. You're in this whole other country playing this game. It's at noon for us, which kind of stinks. But still, game day is going to be there and what have you. It's going to be really the biggest week 0 game, obviously. So I think there's a lot of different moving parts to this one. right? And let's talk about the line here. So 10.5, Florida State. And that moved down from like 13.5, and I think it was almost 14.5 at one point, depending on what sports book you looked at. So all the sharp money right now is on Tech to cover. And I'm with it. Because obviously we've covered Tech. I've covered Tech for a while now, and especially under Brent Key because he's intriguing for the reasons I already noted. I like Tech here to cover that. And I think it would not be surprising for an outright win. It wouldn't.
So you're going to go Tech to cover
Yeah.
in the under, or you're going to take the points?
What's the over-under?
55.5.
55.5. That seems like a lot of points to me.
It does, but I always assume Georgia Tech is the wing T, and I know they're not the wing T anymore. So I assume that they're like going to go under. So I can't really. I agree. Everything you said, I agree with. I like that coach for Georgia Tech a lot. And my theory with Georgia Tech has always been this: they should have never been as bad as they got because of who they like, because of the location, the history of Georgia Tech, and the fact that they're in the ACC. And, I get there was a number of different factors, whatever. But I think there's no reason they should not win 8 games a year, in my opinion, right? And so I think this coach can get them to that. Like, they're never going to be a true competitor to Georgia, right? As long as Kirby's there. But I'm with you. I think they're a much better football team. I think they're well coached. I think they play disciplined football up front on both sides of the ball. And they have played in Ireland before, so it is not a foreign concept to them. And I would imagine that they're going to push Florida State to the brink, in my opinion. So yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the under too. Let's go under 55. Are you taking the under, or are you going over?
Yeah, I was going to take the under, but Georgia Tech.
Okay, so we're both we're same picks here. So we're going to both start 1-0. That's what we're going to do. Week 0, 1-0.
We're probably both going to start 0-1. But yeah, I agree with you. We're going to same picks.
Why'd you say that? So now it's out there forever. Now it's in the cloud. Thanks, Artie. Thanks for everyone joining us. If you're listening, wherever you get your podcasts, or joining us live here on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, really appreciate it. Again, our show schedule this season, Monday and Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have former Georgia Bulldogs, among other guests. We're going to do our pregame predictions, picks, everything you need to know to get you ready for game day. Next week, Georgia Clemson, baby, and Mercedes-Benz, Atlanta. It's going to be a great, great matchup. We'll get into detail on that next week for you guys. Don't be afraid to jump in the comments in the future this season. We'd love to answer some questions that you have, and if we forget a name, throw it in there. That's always good, especially for Artie. He's got a lot going on in his mind, having to learn and read and write again. So it's tough for him.
I never learned, Coach. You know what I mean?
But yeah, thanks for everybody for joining us, and we'll be back next week. Can't wait for college football season to be here. We're gonna be watching Georgia Tech and Florida State this Saturday. Go ahead and put a little earnings on Tech. That's our example of gifts giving here in college football season as it approaches. Thanks for everyone. We'll see you soon. Artie, take care, man. Get to class.
Go Dogs.